More lay quiet in the warm sun, and along the single street, nothing stirred. From the porch of the empty house in which we had been camping, I looked up the street, feeling the tautness that lay beneath the calm. Orrin was asleep inside the house, and I was cleaning my 44 Henry. There was trouble building, and we all knew it. 50 or 60 of the settlement crowd were in town, and they were getting restless for something to do. But I had my own plans, and didn't intend that they should be ruined by a bunch of imported troublemakers. Tom Sunday came out of the porch and stopped under the overhang where I was working on my rifle. He took out one of those thin black cigars and lighted up. "Are you riding out today?" "Out to the place," I said. "We found us a place about 8 or 9 miles from here." He paused and took the cigar from his mouth. "I want a place too. But first I want to see what happens here. A man with an education could get into politics and do all right here." He walked down the street. Tom was no fool. He knew there was going to be a demand for some law in Mora, and he intended to be it. I knew he wouldn't take a back seat because of Orrin. It worried me to think of what would happen when Orrin and Tom found out each other wanted the same office. Although I doubted if Orrin would mind too much. When I finished cleaning my rifle, I saddled up, put my blanket roll behind the saddle, and got ready to ride out. Orrin crawled out of bed and came to the door. "I'll be out later, or Cap will," he said. "I want to keep an eye on things here." He walked up the horse with me. "Tom say anything?" "He wants to be marshal." Orrin scowled. "Damn it, Tyrel. I was afraid of that. He'd probably make a better marshal than me." "There's no telling about that, but I'd say it was a toss-up, Orrin. But you can win the election. I just hate to see you two set off against each other. Tom's a good man." Neither one of us said anything for a while, standing there in the sun, thinking about it. It was a mighty fine morning, and hard to believe so much trouble was building around us. "I've got to talk to him," Orrin said at last. "This ain't right. We've got to level with him." All I could think of was the fact that the four of us had been together 2 years now, and it had been a good period for all of us. I wanted nothing to happen to that. Friendships are not so many in this life, and we had put rough country behind us and kicked up some dust in our passing, and we had smelled a little powder smoke together. And there's nothing that binds men together like sweat and gun smoke. "You go ahead, Orrin. We'll talk to Tom tomorrow." I wanted to be there when it was talked out because Tom liked me and he trusted me. He and Orrin were too near alike in some ways and too different in others. There was room enough for both of them, but I was quite sure that Tom would want to go first. It took me a shade more than an hour to ride down to where we figured to start ranching. There were trees along the river there and some good grass, and I bedded down at the mouth of the gap in a corner among the rocks. Picketed Montana horse, I switched from boots to moccasins and scouted around, choosing the site for the house and the corrals. The bench where the house was to be, it was only 20 feet above the river, but above the highest watermark. The cliff raised up behind the bench, and the location, it was a good one. Peeling off my shirt, I worked through the afternoon, clearing rocks and brush off the building site and pacing it off. And then I cut poles and began building a corral for our horses, for we would need that first of all. Later, when dark began to come, I bathed in the creek, and putting on my clothes, I built a small fire and made coffee and chewed on some jerked beef After I'd eaten, I dug into my saddlebags for a book and settled down to read. Time to time, I'd get up and look around or stand for a spell in the darkness away from the fire, just listening. And by the time the fire was burning down, I moved back from the fire and unrolled my bed. A bit of wind was blowing up and a few clouds had drifted over the stars. Taking my rifle, I went out to check on Montana Horse, who was close by, and I shifted his picket pin a little closer and on fresh grass. And there was a feel to the night that I didn't like, and I found myself wishing the boys would show up. When I heard a sound, it was faint, but Montana Horse, he got it too. His head came up, and his ears pricked, and his nostrils reached out for the smell of things. Putting a hand on his shoulder, I said, "All right, boy, you just take it easy." Somebody was out there in the night calling to me. And now a man who goes rushing out in the night will sooner or later wind up with a bullet in his belly. Me, I circled around scouting and moving mighty easy, and I had a slight more enemies in this country than friends. It wasn't any time at all until I saw a standing horse, and I heard a low moan, and then I moved in, and it was a man on the ground, and he was bad hurt. "Mr. Sackett," the voice was faint. "Please, it's Miguel. I come to you, but I bring trouble." So I scooped him off the ground, and I put him on his horse. I said, "You hang on." I said, "It's only a few yards. Men come to kill me, Tyrel. It will be trouble. I'll talk to them," I said. "I'll read them from the scriptures." He passed out. But I got him to camp and unloaded him. He was shot all right. He had the hell shot out of him. There was a bullet hole in his thigh, and there was another high in his right chest that had gone clean through. And his clothes were soaked with blood, and he was all in. There was water by the fire, so I peeled back the clothes and went to work. First off, I bathed away the blood and plugged the holes and stopped the bleeding. And come daylight, if he made it, I was going to have to do more. With the tip of my bowie, I slit the hide and eased a bullet out from under the skin out of his back, and then I bathed the wound and fixed it up as best I could. And I could hear riders working their way down the country, hunting him. And sooner or later, they'd see the reflection of my fire, and then I'd have to take care of that. Moving Miguel back out of the firelight, I got him stashed away when I heard them coming, and they came with a rush. "Hello, the fire. You're talking. Speak your piece." "We're hunting a wounded greaser. You seen him?" "I've seen him, and he's here, but you can't have him." They rode up to the fire then, and I stepped up to the edge of the light. Trouble was, one of those riders had a rifle, and it was on me. In the range, it wasn't 15 feet. That rifle worried me. They had me sweating. A fast man on the draw can beat a man who has to think before he can fire. But that first shot better be good. "It's Sackett. The kid they say is a gunfighter." "So it's Sackett." It was a sandy-haired man with two tied-down guns like one of those show-off gunmen. "I ain't seen none of his graveyards." "You just ride on," I said. "Miguel is here. He stays here. You're talking mighty big, ain't you?" That man was Charlie Smith, a big man, bearded and tough, hard to handle in a difficulty, it was said. And the one with the rifle, he was thin, angular, with a Bob and Adam's apple, and a shooting look to him. "He's wounded," I said. "I'll take care of him." "We don't want him alive," Smith said. "We want him dead. You give him to us and you're out of it. Sorry. That's all right, Sandy said. I like it this way. I prefer it this way. That Sandy didn't worry me as much as the man with the rifle, although the chances were that Sandy had practiced some with those guns. Even a show-off may be pretty fast, and I had that to think about. Of one thing I was sure, there was no talking my way out of this. I could stand by and see them kill Miguel, or I could fight them. Now, I'm not a smoking man myself, but Miguel's makings had fallen from his pocket, and I'd picked them up, so I got them out, and I started to roll the smoke. And while I talked, I went right on building that smoke. But what I needed was an edge, and I needed it bad. And there was this man with the rifle, and Charlie Smith, and there was this Sandy lad who fancied himself with the 6-shooters. And there might be more back in the dark, but those three I had to think about. Miguel, I said, and I was talking for time, is a good man. I like him, and I wouldn't interfere in any fight of his, but on the other hand, I don't like to see a wounded man shot without a chance either. Smith was the cagey one, and he was looking around, and I guess Smith was worried about Orrin. He knew we were a team, and he knew there was 4 of us, and there might be, just might be, somebody out there in the dark. No, I was doing some serious thinking. A man who holds a gun on somebody is all keyed up and ready to shoot when he first gets the drop on you. But after a while, his muscles get a little heavy, and his reactions will be a little slower. Moreover, these fellows outnumbered me 3-1. They had the advantage, so they just didn't think anybody would be fool enough to tackle them. And that was against them too. It sort of made them relax mentally, if you get what I mean. Only any move I made, it must be timed just right. And I had to slicker them into thinking of something else. If they killed Miguel when he was wounded in my camp, I'd never feel right again, even if I'd lived. Miguel, Smith said, is one of Alvarado's men, and we're running them out. Where's your brother? The man with the rifle was asking. He had some of his attention on the shadows out there. In his place, I'd have been giving them plenty of thought. He's around. Those boys are never far off. Only one bed. That was Sandy shooting off his fat mouth. I can see it. That was the man with the 2 big pistols who wanted to kill me. He could make it sound mighty big later. Charlie Smith, he was going to kill me because he didn't want anybody around taking a shot at him later. Putting that cigarette between my lips, I stooped down and picked up a burning twig to light it. I lifted it to my cigarette, holding it to my fingers while I had my say. The 4 of us, I said, we're never spread out very far. We work together, we fight together, and we can win together. They ain't around, Sandy Boy said. Only one bed. Only his horse and the greasers. Up on the hills, there was a stirring in the pines, and because I'd been hearing it all evening, I knew it was a wind along the ridge, but they stopped talking to listen. I'm a Sackett, I said conversationally, out of Tennessee. We finished a feud a couple of years ago. Somebody from the other outfit shot a Sackett, and we killed 19 Higginses in the next 16 years. We'll never stop hunting. I got a brother named Tell Sackett. Best gunshot ever lived. I took him a hit of my cigarette and coughed a little. I was just talking, and that twig was burning, and Charlie Smith saw it, and as it was burning down to my finger, he said, "Hey, you'll burn your..." And the fire touched my fingers, and I yelped with pain. And I dropped the twig, and with the same continuous movement, I drew my gun, and I shot that rifleman out of the saddle. Sandy was grabbing iron when I swung my gun on him and thumbed my hammer twice, so it sounded like one shot, and he went backwards off his horse, like he'd been hit with an axe. And swinging my gun on Smith, I saw him on the ground, holding his belly, and Tom Sunday came riding up with a Henry rifle. "Smartest play I ever saw," he said, watching Smith on the ground. "When I saw you lighting up, I knew there had to be something, knowing you don't smoke." "Thanks. You sure picked a good time to ride up." Sunday got down and walked over the man who held the rifle, and he was dead with a shot through the heart. And Sandy had taken 2 bullets through the heart also. And Sunday glanced at me. I saw it, but I still don't believe it. Thumbing shells in my gun, I walked over to Miguel, and he was up on one elbow. His face was pale, all the blood gone, and I had to believe his eyes bigger. But he said, "Thank you, amigo," he whispered. "Orrin told me that you'd come out here, and I was restless, so I figured I'd ride out and camp with you. When I saw you in the middle of them, I was trying to figure out what to do that wouldn't start them shooting at you. Then you did it. They'd have killed us. Pritts will take your helping Miguel as a declaration of war." There was more sound out of the darkness, and we pulled back out of the light of the fire. And it was Cap Roundtree and 2 of Alvarado's hands, and one of them was Pete Romero. But the other was a man I didn't know. And he was slim, knife-like, in braided leather. The most duded-up man I ever saw. But his pearl-handled 6-shooter was hung for business, and he had a look in his eye I didn't like. His name was Chico Cruz. Cruz walked over to the bodies and looked at them. He took out a silver dollar and he placed it over the 2 bullet holes in Sandy's chest. He pocketed the dollar and looked at us. "Who?" Sunday jerked his head to indicate me. "His. And that one too." He indicated the man with the rifle. Then he explained what had happened, not mentioning the burning twig, but the fact that I'd been covered by the rifle. Cruz looked at me carefully, and I had a feeling this was a man who enjoyed killing and who was proud of his ability with a gun. He squatted by the fire and poured a cup of coffee. It was old coffee, black and strong. Cruz seemed to like it. Out in the darkness, helping Romero get Miguel into his saddle, I asked, "Who is he?" "From Mexico. Tor sent for him. He is a bad man. He's killed many men." Cruz looked to me like one of those sleek prairie rattlers who move like lightning and kill just as easily. And there was nothing about him that I liked. Yet, I understand the Don sending for him. The Don was up against a fight for everything he had. It worried him. And he knew he was getting old, and he was no longer sure that he could win. When I came back to the fire, Chico Cruz looked up at me. "It was good shooting," he said, "but I can shoot better." Now, I'm not a man to brag, but how much better can you get? "Maybe," I said. "Someday we might shoot together," he said, looking at me through the smoke of his cigarette. "Someday," I said quietly, "we might." "I shall look forward to it, Senor." And I smiled at him. "I shall look back on it